Welcome, Lily King. So thank you so much for coming this evening.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Fleur. It's really an honor.
Oh, honestly, the honor is all ours. I just was so excited to see this new book when it was announced, because Euphoria was Lily's previous book published in the UK, and it was such a hit in our bookshop. It was a proper word of mouth, like anybody who read it recommended it to friends, and it was a sort of absolute bestseller that we felt that we had some little ownership of, that we had started. So it was a very special book for the shop. So
Nice.
thank you.
Thank you.
But Lily's here to talk about your latest novel, Writers and Lovers. So I thought I'll hand over to you to give us a short introduction.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Oh, I forgot the English version. So this is the American version right here. And it is about a young woman who is 31 years old. Her name is Casey Peabody, and she has just moved back to Massachusetts. She's about $70,000 in debt. Her mother has just died. She is living in a really moldy room in the side of a garage that used to be a potting shed. And she's working at a fancy restaurant in Harvard Square in Massachusetts. And she's just had her heart broken, and she's trying to write her first novel. And things are really spiraling a little bit out of control for her when she meets two men, both writers. And, you know, they kind of make things worse for a while. And it's really about a woman, kind of in a man's world. It's 1997. Publishing is still very much male dominated. And she's trying to figure out, you know, if she can actually do this, and how to get to the sort of the other side of the rest of her life. She feels like she perhaps has made all of the wrong choices, and she's kind of in front of this abyss, and she has to get across, and she doesn't really know how. She's sort of stuck. And I'll just say that one of the reasons I wrote this book, I was, after Euphoria, I did a whole bunch of research on another book about a male writer in 1901 traveling with his mother in Europe. And I did, you know, months of research. I had a whole plot outline and tons of notes. And I was about 20 pages in when my own mother died, very, very suddenly, much like Casey's in the book. And I couldn't write for about 6 months, and I could never, when I did start writing again, I could never go back to that book that I was working on. And this is the book that kind of poured out of me. And I think the reason that is because I felt so vulnerable, you know, after my mom died. It was so out of the blue, and we were very close, and she was in full health and died on vacation, not really sure still why. And I think that kind of sudden blow in life reminded me of being vulnerable when I was actually in my late 20s and early 30s trying to write a novel, and feeling a lot of the emotions that my character Casey feels. And I think for some reason that time in my life kind of bubbled up after my mom died, and that's why I sort of plunged in on writing that book. And I think I also needed a place to put all of my feelings about grief. And yet it, you know, it's about so much more than grief, but there is a, you know, a part of it is that she's lost her mother, and she's trying to figure out how to get through that.
I think it's very beautifully done, the grief and the relationship with her mother, because I think the way that it sort of is placed throughout the novel feels very natural, the sort of memories and the way that they do bubble up, and how certain things are affected or what have you. But like you said, it's not a novel just about grief. It is about so much more. And I think, I mean, it's interesting you said you were writing a novel about a male writer and then you couldn't return to that, because it feels very, very much about the pursuit of your dreams and the very male and female divide between who's allowed and who allows themselves. And I don't know if you'd like to talk a little bit about that perhaps, or.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought I was writing about someone trying to become a writer. And since I've published it, it's funny, people have really shown me all the stuff that I was writing about gender. And I mean, of course, I knew on the one hand I was writing about that, but when I write fiction, it's not a polemic. I'm not trying to, write a persuasive essay. I'm trying to create an experience for the reader. And so I'm not really thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to make that point and I'm going to make that point. And, but I guess it was just a very natural thing for me because I lived that, I kind of wrote a lot of what I observed and what I thought about and what I have thought about, during my whole career, and all of that kind of poured in there. And it turns out I had a lot to say about, how women feel when they pursue their dreams and how it seems to me like men feel. And that, I mean, one of the things that I've realized in writing this is that in perhaps, in the book and also maybe in my head, I as a woman, I think pursuing my dreams, the doubts and the fears come in because you feel like I'm not good enough. There's just this terrible fear of failure and that it's my fault, right? And it just seems to me that for some men, when they pursue their dream and it doesn't get immediately recognized or they don't have immediate success, the sense of failure is really the world's failure not to recognize them, and that my character Oscar, is definitely showing that, it's the bookstore's fault. It's, it's people not recognizing his greatness. And I think it's a huge generalization to say that all men do that and all women do this, but I do think that maybe as women, some women tend to beat themselves up more and men tend to beat up the world more. But I'm open to arguing about that.
I mean, it's a really interesting, it's just interesting the way that you put it out there, because it's not done in a way that, like you said, it's not a polemic and you don't feel that there's that, that sort of anger weight behind it, but it is there. I mean, there is, I don't know, I just want to remind me, there's a line that I'd highlighted, which is not a spoiler or anything. And it was, am I going to find it now? Oh yes, I think she's talking about the sort of books that her previous partner liked, and she says Paco had one of his books, I think, and I didn't much like the writers Paco did. Men who wrote tender, poetic sentences that tried to hide the narcissism and misogyny of their stories. And I thought, ouch, but also very true.
Okay. I mean, when I was Casey's age, when I was Casey's age, I was worshiping those writers. It's only, in the past maybe 15 years that I've, really started to be aware of the narcissism and the misogyny in those beautiful, beautiful novels that I love so much in the 80s and 90s.
And also, I mean, the sort of confidence trick that, I don't know, perhaps writers have to play on themselves somehow in order to sort of validate what they're doing. In sort of talking about the pursuit of dreams, it feels that if your dream is not arts related, there's less of that sort of self-validation that maybe it is women that find that harder to do or what have you. Because I think the theme that I felt quite strongly was not just about the male and female validation of whatever pursuing your artistic dreams, but also that idea of maturity. And at what point, you're in pursuit of your dreams, and it's a sort of incredibly mature thing to know what you want and to be going after it. But then there's sort of a tipping point whereby if other people have stopped pursuing those same dreams, are they more mature, or disillusionment just a mature thing? I think that's a really interesting conversation that the book opens up as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really interesting to me that when I handed the book in and the publishing house started, making the marketing language to go with it, it was called kind of a coming of age novel, right? And how she finds herself, and she finally reaches adulthood, and it felt very much like, is adulthood contingent on some sort of success or validation? And if she hadn't, like, I don't want to blow the book for anybody, but if the book took another turn, would she have been considered having come of age, or would she still be in limbo? I don't know. It does. I have kind of trouble with that, because I think the point, not the point exactly, but my feeling is that pursuing your dream, regardless of success or failure, is a very, very worthwhile and successful endeavor. I think that you owe that to yourself, for your whole life, and regardless of if it ever kind of happens for you.
I know, Lily, you said you were kindly going to read the opening passage. Yeah, so it'd probably be a nice time to do that.
Okay. So I thought I would just start at the beginning and just read a couple of pages. I think I've told you enough that I can just start on in. I have a pact with myself not to think about money in the morning. I'm like a teenager trying not to think about sex, but I'm also trying not to think about sex, or Luke, or death, which means not thinking about my mother who died on vacation last winter. There are so many things I can't think about in order to write in the morning. Adam, my landlord, watches me walk his dog. He leans against his Benz in a suit and sparkling shoes as I come up the driveway. He's needy in the morning. Everyone is, I suppose. He enjoys his contrast to me and my sweats and untamed hair. When the dog and I are closer, he says, "You're up early." I'm always up early. "So are you," I say. "Meeting with the judge at the courthouse at 7 sharp. Admire me, admire judge and courthouse and 7 sharp. Well, somebody's got to do it, I say. I don't like myself around Adam. I don't think he wants me to. I let the dog yank me a few steps past him toward a squirrel squeezing through some slats at the side of his big house. "So," he says, unwilling to let me get too far, "how's the novel?" He says it like I made the word up myself. He's still leaning against his car and turning only his head in my direction, as if he likes his pose too much to undo it. It's all right. The bees in my chest stir. A few creep down the inside of my arm. One conversation can destroy my whole morning. I've got to get back to it. Short day, working a double. I pull the dog up Adam's back porch, unhook the leash, nudge him through the door, and drop quickly back down the steps. "How many pages you got now?" "A couple of 100, maybe." I don't stop moving. I'm halfway to my room at the side of his garage. He says, pushing himself off his car, waiting for my full attention, "I just find it extraordinary that you think you have something to say." I sit at my desk and stare at the sentences I wrote before walking the dog. I don't remember them. I don't remember putting them down. I'm so tired. I look at the green digits on the clock radio. Less than 3 hours before I have to dress for my lunch shift. Adam went to college with my older brother, Caleb. In fact, I think Caleb was a little in love with him back then. And for this, he gives me a break in the rent. He shaves off a bit more for walking his dog in the morning. The room used to be a potting shed and still has a loam and rotting leaves smell. There's just enough space for a twin mattress, desk and chair and hot plate and toaster oven in the bathroom. I set the kettle back on the burner for another cup of black tea. I don't write because I have something to say. I write because if I don't, everything feels even worse. Thanks.
Thank you, Lily. That's such a Red Shoes line, isn't it? Do you know the Red Shoes with Moira? Is it Moira Shearer, where she says, someone asks her, "Why do you dance?" And he says, "Why do you breathe?" And it's like, So she's busy writing, and she works in a restaurant. And I just think that the portrait of the restaurant is so vivid and amazing, and the dynamics of all the people who work in there, it's like a mini novel within a novel. And I wondered if you would maybe talk a little bit about, you know, your research and your knowledge and, you know, what have you about that.
Sure. I was nervous to try to, you know, create the restaurant scenes. I waited tables in college and in grad school and afterwards, for years. I mean, you know, if I add up all of my waiting tables, it's probably about 12 years, on and off. But I was worried that, like, I mean, that was, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago. And I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to remember it. And, but I really wanted to capture that contrast between writing and working in a restaurant, because for me, it was a really good combination. I mean, you know, until it wasn't, until it just drove me crazy. But you know, it's active, you're always moving, there's always so much going on, and you're so engaged with people. And then you're over, you know, it's over, your shift is over and it's 1 a.m. and you're buzzing, and, you know, you have the long walk or ride home, and you have all of these, you know, there's a lot of class stuff that's going on at a restaurant like that, both between the people who come in and the people who are waiting on them, but also, you know, all the different gradations within the staff, you know, in the back of the house, in the front of the house, and people who are there, you know, just part-time while they're getting their education, and other people who have been working in restaurants for 30 years, and those kind of clashes. And then, of course, you know, again, there's just a lot of sexism. The clients can be very sexist, and, you know, you're kind of over a barrel as a waitress. You're working for the tip. You are not working for I think I got paid $1.95 per hour. And so the real money was in the tips. And so, you know, you had to put up with a lot of stuff from customers in order to make your rent. And that's all really tricky too. And so anyway, I started writing it, and the terms came back to me, and it came back, and that felt really good. Of course, I was worried that people are just going to be really bored by it, you know, as I always am about absolutely everything I write. I try to ignore those worries and just write into it, you know, write it the best I can.
Oh, it's the opposite of boring. And I think, as well, as an English reader, the whole complicated tip system and the sort of professionalization of being a waiter or a waitress, it's not what we're used to. And so it felt very alive and brilliant. But the class thing is really interesting, because I get the sort of intense movement as opposed to Casey's writing life and the very sort of internal, you know, parts, the quieter parts, I suppose, you know, where it's very internal. But the other thing that, I mean, you say about the class, that again, for an English reader, oh my goodness, the healthcare system. It's just, wow. I mean, you paint it in all its terrifying detail. And I think what's really interesting is, I suppose, you know, you could have an idea that basically, you know, you're a victim of the healthcare system if you are somehow poor and stupid. Perhaps it's your fault, you know, that you don't have a good job, or you don't. But what's really interesting about the fact that you've given all those problems to Casey is she's in that situation as a result of her education. So that is why, you know, she's in that position. And I think that's a really interesting an interesting discussion that you make within the novel. So,
oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a real intersection between all of her student loan debts and the lack of health care. And I mean, honestly, again, not a polemic. And I'm glad that you were able to sense what a disaster that healthcare system is. Because, you know, I just, you know, I was just trying to have her move through it, but not like score points about it. But I'm glad that it did seem horrific, because I was trying to go light on it. I mean, it could have been I could have gone heavy and really beaten it in there. Because it's so much worse than even it is. And, you know, I mean, lucky for her, she, you know, she didn't have cancer, you know, or anything. I mean, it would have been so much worse. So
I just think the idea we're so lucky and we just don't realize how lucky we are. And the idea that we would have to choose between issues, potentially, it's kind of like, well, I either deal with the cancer or I deal with the other thing that's also a potentially serious life-threatening thing, but I cannot afford to deal with both. Is, you know, we're incredibly fortunate here. So
I know. The last time, well, not the last time, maybe the second to last time I was in London, I dislocated my shoulder on the first night that I was there in the hotel. And I was with my husband and my daughter, our first daughter, who was just 1 at the time. And we'd all been in the bed and we were exhausted. And I just moved my arm in the wrong way, you know, rolling over in bed. And I had to go to the hospital, you know, and it was all free. I mean, I never got a bill. You know, they put it all back. It's a long story because I was also pregnant, but I didn't know it. And they gave me a test and they told me I wasn't pregnant. I was hysterically crying because I wanted to be pregnant. Anyway, but it was, I always think about that because I can't tell you how much more expensive it would have been in this country. It was free.
Lucky us.
Yeah.
But I mean, all of these things are what make it so fascinating for an English reader, I think. And I mean, even just back to the class and the restaurants. And I was struggling to remember. There was some reference I could think of where it felt I'd heard somewhere that people were for now, like you're a waiter or a waitress for now, you're, you know, a tutor for now. But there is a sort of American dream thing of, you know, but someday there'll be something else, you will be something else. And I don't know, I don't know, it's not even a question, but I just thought it was a really interesting point that felt so intensely American about the novel as well for us. So
that's really interesting. Yeah, I think it is you know, yeah, we don't, I don't know. I'm so down on America right now. I can't even tell you, but that is one nice thing that, you know, with this sense of remaking yourself and not being, I don't know, pigeonholed in education at a very, very early age and having to get on a track. I mean, you know, maybe that's like one nice thing I can say.
Lily, I wanted to ask you about art as well. Just I mean, one, I have to say, when I asked for your photo to put on a poster and your publicist sent these pictures of you beside beautiful pieces of art. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your relationship, because paintings come into the novel at various points as well, I think. And I wondered if you could just talk about your relationship with art or the art.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't really think much about it, but first of all, I have a really great photographer who's a friend of mine, and she lives down the road, and she always does my photos. And she put me in front of that painting that is my mother-in-law's painting. She's a really, really beautiful, talented painter. I think she's 83 now. And she is as determined and focused as ever. In fact, she just rented an apartment down the road for a month so she can work, because she's been living with her boyfriend and it's been very distracting. And now she just really, and it's so great to see, you know, at age 83, she is just so passionate. So anyway, my husband is also a painter, and my 2 daughters, who are beautiful, beautiful writers, they're 19 and 21 now. They both go to art school. They're such good writers, and yet they like painting better. And so I am surrounded by artists. My aunt was an artist. I really love art, but I used to do a little bit of art, but now my family is so talented that I'm actually ashamed to like even do any drawing, because they're just incredible. But I really enjoyed on their first date in the book, Silas and Casey go to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and they hang out in front of this one painting and they just talk about it. And I loved writing that, you know. I love introducing other kinds of art into novels, you know, in any way I can. I really enjoy that. And so I remember early on, I think for my first novel, someone asked me if I was a painter because they felt like so many of my scenes felt like paintings. I thought that was really interesting. I had never thought about that before, but I probably am a fairly visual person.
I think that definitely comes across, and I would do too much rustling to try and find it, but there's a line, if it's not too much of a spoiler, but that scene, I adore that scene in the gallery, and I think she describes, I think the way a belt joins or something, and she says to be able to write something as beautiful as the way that belt joins the skirt or something, and you get that, and it's this sort of powerful feeling, whether it's a piece of music or a visual thing, it's all sort of engenders the same feelings inside, and you write that very well. So
thank you so much. I really felt that. I mean, that painting is amazing, and that little, you know, how he's dealing with light is so incredible, and it just makes you want to be able to do that in words, you know.
I do have your American jacket because we met briefly in America at the Winter Institute.
Oh my gosh.
I just thought it would be interesting, actually. I'm going to hold up both covers because they are intensely different. So this is the US and this is the UK on this side. And I wondered, I don't know, did you get choices? Like, what are your feelings? Because they are just intensely different.
I know.
I'm going to keep them held up so everyone can still see them.
Yeah, so with the American version, I got 3. They sent me 3 last summer. And I was actually teaching in Italy at the time, and I got it on my phone, and I liked that one the least. And then there was one with kind of like it was almost a little bit like a Van Gogh, like the bedroom at Arles, you know, painting. And it was kind of just a messy bedroom, and that was the one that I wanted. But nobody liked that. Everybody I showed it to, most people liked that. And I was worried that it made it look too much like a food novel, you know, like a novel with recipes, and kind of stodgy, middle-aged, you know. Of course I am middle-aged, but I don't want to be middle-aged. And then I showed it to all my kids' friends, and my kids and their friends, and they all liked it too. And they didn't think it was stodgy, and they didn't know that you could have recipes in a novel. And so, and my publishing house really loved that one. So that's the one everybody ended up convincing me that was the best one. And then that was the only one I saw with Picador from England. And I loved it. You can't really see from where you're holding it up, but there's like the binding material in the cutout of the woman in the middle of those books. It's as if you peeled away the spine of the book and you saw the glue and the various little sets of paper that make up a book. It's very cool. I am completely crazy about that cover. And yeah, I like it the very best, to be honest with you.
Wow, that's good that's our cover. As endorsed by the author.
And I love the end pages. I haven't seen it yet. My copy hasn't arrived. But I look at that. That's so beautiful. I just love that so much.
Perfect. Oh, I don't know. I wonder if I think maybe because I've seen that we've got quite a few questions coming up, so maybe we'll go and ask a question and then we can see where we go from there. So let's. I'm going to go to the first one, and actually, it's Rochelle, and Okay, she's asking, and she's asked me to ask, so but anyone else can ask themselves, so it's not just that I'm just being like a hog. So she wants to know if you could tell us one or two of the narcissistic male writers that you mentioned earlier that you used to love.
Oh, ooh, okay, all right, I'll do it. First of all, James Salter. I really, really, really love, I don't know, you know, how well known he is there. But he wrote a collection of short stories called Dusk, which are so beautiful. And some of them are so sexist. I mean, just painfully sexist, and yet so beautiful. The language is gorgeous. He also wrote, the thing that made him famous, I think, was A Sport and a Pastime, which is just like soft porn, you know, and it's all about these two men and this woman and their kind of fantasies about her. And I never really, really loved that. I could see that it was beautiful writing, but even at the time, I couldn't have identified necessarily because I was really quite young when I read it. But I knew it made me uncomfortable. So definitely James Salter. And of course, John Updike, another one of my like first loves. My high school English teacher loved Updike, and we read so much of him. And I just think he is one of the most beautiful writers, especially his short stories. But again, the role that women play in his male characters' lives, you know, they are just there to satisfy a man. They are not allowed their own full humanity. And that in his sex, you know, like he uses sex with women as a way to, you know, put off death or I don't know, forget about death or something. And you just feel how these women are used for sort of a higher end for his own life and purposes. I'm talking about the characters, not necessarily Updike himself, but who knows. So, and it's disappointing. It's not like I still respect their writing, and I still think there's a lot to learn from it. But I think I was raised on men. I feel like my whole education was misogynistic until grad school. And that is disheartening, really. Hard to handle.
Oh, thank you, Lily. I mean, I don't know. I really don't want to give away any spoilers at all, but there is a character who very much in the sort of love triangle, there's the love where someone is seen, and then there's the love where they just want to project that onto somebody. And if you kind of have the shape that possibly fits, you'll do, but you don't have to be actually seen or known. And oh gosh, it's just, I think it's written so clearly. I imagine, I don't know, I'm sort of old and married, but I imagine that if I was on the lookout for love, I wish I could have that clarity and vision where you could recognize this one good, this one not good at all. He has no idea of anything about you. So yeah. Right, okay, so who's next? I'm going to go to Tom Hayden. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Tom. He's my old boss. I used to work for Tom Hayden at a used bookstore in California, if it's the same Tom Hayden, of course.
It is. Hey, Lily,
Hi,
how are you?
How are you?
Great.
Oh, nice to see you.
So you probably won't mind this comparison, but I'm halfway through it, so no spoilers. But
Okay.
I love the little details, whether it's describing you know, an object or a person, especially all the little details you just throw in about somebody who I assume is going to be a very minor character. And repeatedly, and those details are they're wonderful because they're even though they're minor, they add up to be major in a tone kind of way. So what it reminds me of a lot is William Trevor, who does that so much.
I love William Trevor.
Yeah, I was figuring you did.
Yeah.
And I've been reading a lot of William Trevor in the last couple of years. So, but you know, there'll be somebody on the bus that the main character sees, and there'll be some kind of backstory to that person sitting on the bus who exists for 4 sentences in the novel or in the story. But he does that all the time, and it's so effective, and
Yeah.
it makes you slow down when you read and you know, paint that picture of what that short phrase said. So I really admired the way you do that too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think it's a real fine line. You know, you want to keep people with you. Like I had one person, because I think the first 30 pages, you know, are tough because there are a ton of details, and the story kind of moves more slowly in those first 30 pages, and then the rest of the book, it starts to kind of move faster. I don't know if you'll notice that, but you know, I had one person say on Instagram or something that they read 12 pages and then drove the book to Goodwill and, you know, gave it away. So, like, you know, some people don't like all that detail, but I like it, and I think it's important to know, you know, what details you need to keep and what details you need to get rid of. But I kind of go by William Carlos Williams's no ideas but in things. You know, I think the things are important in writing to describe, and then they can be very evocative.
Mm-hmm. And Casey holds back details too about, I mean, there are things you don't learn about her until quite a few pages in, and then it's sort of dropped. And sometimes there's a little hint which you don't learn more about until 50 pages later. Yeah,
that's mostly because I didn't ever want to tell her backstory, really, but my editor made me. So.
Well, it's really wonderful, and it's so different than Euphoria, but certainly in terms of subject, and I guess you know, Europe in 1901 would have been
yeah. It's so good to see you, Tom. So great.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I was going to ask, just I'm going to skip one question and then come back to it, because I think Charlotte Rosser, just as we're talking about Casey's backstory, I think, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi there.
Hi.
I wondered why we don't get a lot of detail about Casey's actual novel. We're not involved in any of the subject matter, or there's really only a couple of hints along as to what she's writing. And I wondered what your reasons were for keeping it sort of a secret.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess I didn't mean to keep it a secret. That we know she's drawing from her mother's experiences in Cuba, and yet she's going to make a twist and give the story, you know, the mother had to make a choice between leaving or staying. And, you know, in the novel, we learn that she chooses to have her mother stay and have a different path. And you're right. That's all we know, right? I think I really wanted to avoid the novel within the novel, because I don't really like that. I don't like it when, you know, you have a character who's a poet and then we have to read their poetry. Or, you know, I didn't want to have to read a chapter of Casey's novel. I did want to describe what it was like to write day to day to day to day, you know, like just every day, you know, really trying to create a whole arc. But I also wanted to leave that up to the reader's imagination, you know, her style, and, you know, what that book was like. Because I know that if I read it, if I read a chapter, if I read a paragraph of Casey's writing, I might be really critical of it. And I just wanted the reader to be able to suspend disbelief that she was a good writer, you know, and everybody has a different idea of what a good writer is. So I think those were my reasons why.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, Olorenshaw, is that Vanessa Olorenshaw? Yes, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sorry about that. I've had my children on their school. Hello, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved this book, and Euphoria as well. Obviously very different subjects, but I think I just needed to ask you really, and I love the fact that you said about art and painting and everything else, because it does feed into what I wanted to ask you, which is the description that Casey gives about the first draft as being the first layer. I loved that. I really did, because it's such a visual thing as well. Is that how you would describe your own process?
Completely. I mean, that is something that I have been telling myself, I think, for about 4 novels now, is this idea that, like, I think when you're writing a novel, you have this sense that really it should be that when you're writing a first draft, that you should really kind of have it all in there. And that thought can really drive you crazy, because you can only do so much in a first draft, and there's so many elements that you are dealing with, and I just need the revision process. You know, I need to go through it, and so, you know, years ago I thought to myself, well, painters don't take a canvas and go, you know, and fill in every single perfect little thing and get from, you know, left side of the canvas to the right side of the canvas and then have their painting. You know, they have an underlayer, they have you know, they do the composition, and, you know, I mean, now I can watch my husband and how he works, and I can see that process more than I used to be able to. And I think it's so reassuring for me to know that I'm just doing the underlayer. I'm just putting in the outlines and the shape of the building and the, you know, the river and the mountain in the background, and, you know, I'm just kind of trying to just get the composition, or just put a few things in place, and so it gives me permission to keep moving, because I think especially a lot of writers come from short story backgrounds, and when you're writing a short story, it's a real tendency to get up every morning and start at the beginning and edit, and then you write a few more paragraphs, and then you get up in the morning and you edit. And with a novel, you cannot do that, and you're just never going to get to the end. And so you have to just go with the momentum of the first draft, and forgive yourself for all your mistakes and all your omissions. And I think that's just so crucial. And but it's hard. It's hard to transition from short works to larger works, and you know, it takes a while, and it's a real mental trick, you know. I think writing a novel is as psychologically complex as, you know, tennis. So there's a lot you have to tell yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Lily. Can I ask about the time, why you set it, or why you chose to set it in the 90s?
Yeah. It felt, I didn't, when I was first, you know, writing the first pages, which are very much like the first pages as they appear now, I did not think about time. I was not thinking about when this was happening. I was just thinking about, okay, she's in the driveway, now she's going to work, and and then she comes home from work that first day, that in the end of the first chapter, and she gets a message on her answering machine. And I remember finishing that scene and being like, oh, there's an answering machine. I guess we're in the 90s. And so that was really it. I mean, it was the answering machine that decided the time period. But I couldn't see it any other way. I just, I mean, I think, you know, obviously partly it was because that the 90s were when I was that age and trying to write my own novel, and it was just easier to draw from that. And not, I mean, honestly, you know, cell phones really determine the time period. You know, do you want to have texts? Do you want to have your cell phone? Or, you know, do you want Silas to be able to send her a postcard and not have any communication with her otherwise? And yes, that's exactly what I wanted and needed. And so I kind of had to go with that.
I don't know, I'm going to make sure that nobody else has got a question that we don't know about, that they haven't put in the chat. Do you want to raise your hand if you've got a question to ask? I can only see one page, so I'm going to flick through the pages. So keep waving if you have. Otherwise, okay. Otherwise, I think, Lily, I would love to ask you. I'd love to ask you. I think I've asked this of most of the authors we've had. Your lockdown, what have you been reading as well as writing, or one or the other? Would you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. I have been reading more than writing, definitely. I'm always, when I'm kind of I mean, I'm supposedly on book tour, right, in my study for the past 3 months, and even if I'm, you know, on a regular book tour, I find it really hard to write something new while I'm talking about my brand new book. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I just need some space and some time and a little break from I mean, it is a little bit like running a marathon, and I don't want to run another marathon right now. And so I haven't been writing much, and I've been trying to forgive myself for that. I've just been writing in my journal and reading a lot. So I have discovered during lockdown, first, Francesca Marciano, who wrote The Other Language, which is just an incredible collection of short stories. And now she has Animal Spirit, another collection of short stories, which is just beautiful, beautiful too. And I don't know if it's already come out there or if it's going to come out, but it's really great. She's an Italian writer who writes in English, and she writes screenplays in Italian. She's a very successful screenplay writer in Italy. But she writes all of her fiction in English, and it's exquisite stuff. So she's my new discovery. And then I read, I think because I've been very frustrated with the lack of leadership in this country, I read the new book about Winston Churchill and the London bombings during World War II, the Blitz, called The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson. And it's, you know, it was just such a wonderful book to read. I mean, it was, you know, obviously extremely painful and awful, but reading about Winston Churchill was really wonderful. It was just delightful. And it was just nice to pretend that he was in my life and not the president we have. And then right now I'm reading Tessa Hadley, who is one of my top 3 writers ever. I just adore her, and you all are so lucky to have her there. And I've read pretty much everything she's written, but I saved one novel for, you know, a time when I need it. And so I'm reading Everything Will Be All Right right now. But I just love her work so much. And I also listen to books on tape. I'm listening to How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, and I love that a lot. And next up is Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, which I've never read. So, but if you all have recommendations for me, I'd be happy to hear them. Because I love, English women are my thing in a big way. All of my top writers are English women, so.
Okay, first person, anyone who's read either Writers and Lovers or Euphoria, who might have a recommendation for Lily, put your hand up and don't be shy. Just do it.
Please.
Right, anybody? Or are you thinking? You're allowed to think. Oh, right. Back to Vanessa.
Well, I suppose it was I mean, she's not English, but she's Irish, Anne Enright.
Oh, love her. And I haven't read Actress. Should I
It's
read
wonderful. Yeah, it's so good. So, and I think
it? Okay,
again,
thank you.
we can kind of claim her as our own because she does have a lot set in London.
Okay, I love Irish literature too. I really belong over there.
You're welcome. come and join us. I've just seen Alice has made a suggestion. Alice, I know we can't see your video, but would you like to unmute yourself and say your suggestion?
Sorry. Yeah, I said Samatha Harvey. Do you know her? I saw Tessa Hadley interview her at the LRB recently about, it's not a fiction book, about her recent book called I want to say it's called The Restless Unease. It's about a year of having insomnia, and it's written almost like it's fiction. It's so beautiful. But all her novels are great as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. No, I know her name, but I've never read her. That's really great.
The Shapeless Unease, I think. I'll just look that up quickly. Yeah, The Shapeless Unease. It's brilliant. Recommend it to everyone.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And last one, Sheena Cook. Where are you?
Am I unmuted?
No, you are. You're good. We can hear you.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to suggest an English dead novelist, and it's Penelope Fitzgerald.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah.
What is your favorite?
The Bookshop.
Oh,
Every time, and it was made into a film, a beautiful film as well.
Really? Oh, I
Yeah.
did not know that. I love that book.
She's sort of a precursor, I would say, to Tessa Hadley, and she's kind of William Trevor-esque and James Salterish. Her prose is as clean as a bone. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great recommendation. I also love, I read, not all that recently, but I just love it so much, Ali Smith's Autumn.
Oh yeah. And that whole series, I think the last one's out, spring and summer are now out as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Just out.
I did not know summer's out. I have spring, and I'm so excited to read it.
I think summer's out in August, so there's not long to wait. So
Okay.
yeah, I think there was a tweet saying it was at the printers. So yeah, nearly there. I'm just going to say though, I've not read Penelope Fitzgerald, which is awful of me to say that I've done that, and I've seen the film as a bookshop owner, and I should probably be struck off the bookshop register for admitting that. But I can't stand these films where it always ends with the bookshop getting torched, or like I don't know, whatever, with the Meg Ryan. Everyone always says, "Oh, you've got mail," and surely that has the worst ending for a film ever. Like the end is just like, no one should watch that. No bookshop owner should have to watch that.
No, I actually, in the book, it's not torched.
Okay.
From what I remember, yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, Lily, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think this is one of the absolute benefits of lockdown, is that we get to do this transatlantically instead of having to sort of foot your flight and I don't know, all the things that would have been impossible. And I just want to tell everybody that we do still have some signed copies. If anybody who hasn't bought the book already, please do buy it and read it, because it is such a wonderful book, and I just can't imagine anyone who would read a few pages and then drive it to a charity shop. They must be crazy. And if you haven't already read Euphoria, I've got a copy of that as well. Please do read this too, because I mean, they are very different. They do both have a love triangle in, though, interestingly. But yeah, just, I don't know. Yeah, they're a gift. The writing is so wonderful in both of them. So please do read them if you haven't done already. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming this evening. And Lily, just enormous thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you all so much. It's so, I can't tell you how great it is to see your faces. It really means so much to me. So thank you. I wish I could be there in person. Next time.
We'll hold you to that.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye. Fleur. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all
Thank you.
so,
Bye-bye.
so much. Thank you.